What's up, everybody? Welcome to the GameOverGreggy show. I'm one of your hosts, Greg Miller, alongside the producer. Oh my God, it's not a Heather Gray shirt.
It's not. It's my black shirt. That's my second favorite color.
Nick Scarpino, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Wearing that filthy cash. Oh, that's one of his chest hairs. You're going to pull it right through the thing.
Get it. Oh, it hurts so
Don't put it on. Oh!
I think you go for good money.
Over here, the Pride of Long Island, Colin Moriarty. And over there, the pure one, Tim Gettys.
Remember the classic, probably the best in the series film, Superman 4, The Quest
How
for
can I
Peace,
forget it?
when they took one of his hairs and made the other guy out of it?
Yeah.
Moon Man.
The hair, it was Moon Man, exactly.
Moon Man.
No, it was so strong that it could hold up whatever 100 tons on that little thing, but it got cut, no problem.
Yeah, they were just like
scissors or whatever. No one thought it through. Like, wait a second. The tensile strength is that can hold, but it can get cut
maybe
really
a
easy.
laser or like some other thing could have cut through it.
No, a
but
krypton. Yeah, nothing. Just scissors.
Some regular old scissors.
I think it might have been gardening shears, but all the same.
Yeah,
blades. Human
scissors.
blades.
Yeah.
Human blades. If you didn't know, ladies and gentlemen, this is the GameOverGreggy show. Each and every week, 4, sometimes 5 best friends gather around this table, each bringing a random topic of discussion for your amusement. You're off on that one. You okay?
I was focusing on the sheer volume of liquid that
There's a lot of liquid
ingest during this
on.
podcast.
Yeah, there's a lot.
And I'm guessing that I'm gonna have to pee twice.
Wow.
I already peed once.
It's not disruptive when you pee during the
Does
show,
that-
so you can
does
definitely
it
try
count?
to pee as much as
Says the
that one
possible.
person who
count?
got up last time twice, did God knows what in there, came back and then stared into the lens of the camera.
Okay, but
for
I
55
did,
seconds.
But I did it during the ad reads.
That's true. That's very
I
true.
do appreciate that more than the other ad read screen caps I get where I'm reading the ad and you all just bring up your phones. Check Twitter, check
What I
whatever.
do. That's the Twitter times.
If you like that, head over to patreon.com/kindafunny where we post the entire show early and give you a bunch of exclusive perks and goodies. If you toss us a few bucks, thank you, Colin.
You did it.
If you got no bucks to toss, head over to youtube.com/kindafunny where you can get the show topic by topic, day by day until we post the entire thing the following Friday on youtube.com/kindafunny and MP3 services around the globe. Nick,
Yes,
you have a computer out. You're all
Yeah.
set.
I do.
What's your
I have
topic?
a serious topic this time. I want to talk about Sulu in the Star Trek series. And recently it came out that Sulu's character is in the next, in Star Trek Beyond, is going to be gay. Now that in and of itself is news, but the bigger news is the reaction that George Takei had to it, and Simon Pegg had to George Takei's reaction. So I'm going to read you guys these quotes real quick, starting off with where the actual idea originated. And I didn't actually realize this, but Simon Pegg helped write the screenplay for Beyond, so he has a bigger hand in the character than I would have thought. The idea came from Simon Pegg, who plays Scotty in the new films and penned the Beyond screenplay with director Justin Lin, both of whom wanted to pay homage to Takei's legacy as both a sci-fi icon and beloved LGBT activist. And so a scene was written into the new film, very matter of fact, in which Sulu is pictured with the male spouse raising their infant child. Pegg and Lin assumed reasonably that Takei would be overjoyed at the development, a manifestation of the conversation with Roddenberry that Takei had long ago during the original series.
Where he wanted there to be a gay character on the show.
Yeah,
correct?
he alluded to the fact that, he thought that would be a good idea, but of course back then that was a different time, and they already gotten a lot of flack from the first interracial on-screen kiss.
Right.
That had a lot of problems, just as far as like not being aired in certain areas because of the inherent racism involved in that. Except Takei wasn't overjoyed. He had never asked for Sulu to be gay. In fact, he'd much preferred that he stayed straight. Quote, "I'm delighted that there's a gay character," he tells the Hollywood Reporter. "Unfortunately, it's a twisting of Gene's creation, to which he put so much thought. I think it's really unfortunate." Takei later explained that Roddenberry was exhaustive in conceiving a Star Trek character, as the name Sulu, for example, was based on the Sulu Sea off the coast of the Philippines, as to render his Asian nationality indeterminate, and that Roddenberry had always envisioned Sulu as heterosexual. So that's interesting in and of itself. But then the Simon Pegg sort of came back with his response, which was, quote, "I have a huge love and respect for George Takei. His heart, courage, and humor are an inspiration. However, with regards to his thoughts on Sulu, I must respectfully disagree with him." He says, quote, "He's right. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that the screen version of the most inclusive, tolerant universe in science fiction hasn't featured an LGBT character until now. We could have introduced the new character, but he or she would have been primarily determined or defined by their sexuality, quote, as seen as the gay character, rather than simply for who they are. And isn't that tokenism?" He later commented that Justin Lin, Doug Jong, and I loved the idea of it being someone we already knew because the audience have a pre-existing opinion of that character as a human being, unaffected by any prejudice. The sexual orientation is just one of the many aspects, not the defining characteristic. Also, the audience would infer that there has been LGBT presence in the Star Trek universe from the beginning, at least in the Kelvin timeline. that a gay hero isn't something new or strange. It's also important to note that at no point do we suggest that our Sulu was ever closeted. Why it needed to be? It just hasn't come up before.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to get your guys' take on that and just see kind of where you sit with how that sits with you, because it's kind of a complex issue.
I think Simon Pegg did a really eloquent job of explaining his piece, and I think that if it was this side or this side, I'm definitely on the Simon side in the sense of like him talking about it. He's been there since the beginning. We're not making a big deal out of it. If it was a gay, all that stuff, it's like those are really valid points that show that he put a lot of thought into this, and he's doing it for a good reason. You know what I mean? And like them, Takei talking about the Gene originally, putting thought into the characters. It's like, well, it's now 2016 and they're putting the same amount of thought into these characters. Obviously, there is that amount of love and care and passion being poured into this universe. And this is a modern day version of Star Trek. It's not where it was before.
Right.
And it's kind of weird to me that Takei kind of has that stance, but I mean, whatever. He has the right to do that. But I get the sense that like him being gay in real life does make it kind of weird that it's like, all right, well, now your character's gay because you're gay. It's like a weird kind of like meta thing.
Yeah, I can see where that perspective would come in, right? Where he's saying, look, I get what you're trying to do, but this character is heterosexual. He was written as heterosexual. That's what the original creator wanted that to be. Making him gay just because I'm gay doesn't necessarily jive well with him. And I can understand how he would see that.
Yeah, both sides, I think, make sense to a great degree. And the one thing I would be interested in, not being the biggest Star Trek fan, I don't think any of us are in terms of anything.
I like it. I like the series, but it's not Star Wars.
The thing about, like, I really liked the reboot, and I really liked what they did with Star Trek. And then I remember enjoying the second one, but not really remembering it. It's one of those movies I saw and forgot. Whereas I remember seeing the reboot and being like, "Fuck, this is awesome. This is great." Since technically it's a reboot, but it's still in that timeline. You know what I mean? Like they went back and changed everything. In the show, was there ever a storyline where Sulu was pursuing a woman or anything like that?
No, they had. So apparently they alluded to the fact that he had an affair with a one-night stand with a woman, and that resulted in the birth of his daughter. But I think that was in one of the movies. Not
Gotcha. Okay.
But to that point, which is fascinating, which I think there's more to that quote that I didn't copy over. But I remember reading at some point he was talking about, like, since this is an alternate timeline, right? Because if you guys remember at the beginning of Star Trek, when they brought it back,
the reboot,
3 or 5, 5 years ago, whatever it was, it altered the timeline. So he was like, I like the idea that in all these alternate timelines, anyone can be gay, anyone can be straight. It doesn't really matter.
Sure.
You know,
I don't think they altered the timeline. It's not like the butterfly effect though, where like when they went back and like, well, now Sulu's gay.
That's true.
Because Kirk stepped on this thing.
That's true. But the idea of, of there being, I don't know.
It's just I'm just saying, like, if I was a fan of Star Trek on that level, and that was that thing, and I think that's where George Takei comes in, is the fact that I understand that argument, and so it's just, if there's a fact, then it kind of fucks up the fiction. That's where it would get, well, that sucks, but it's cool, but whatever.
Since we're talking about Star Trek, first let me be the first to say Nanu Nanu to all the Trekkies out there.
Nailed it.
Thank you. Crushed it.
Now
that was a Mork and Mindy reference for you, Tim.
You like Mork and Mindy?
Do you even know what Mork and Mindy is?
Yeah, Robin Williams and someone else.
That's some chick.
And Mindy.
More Robin Williams and Mindy.
Mindy Project.
What was her name?
So I'm of two minds. I'm of two minds with this, as I am with many things, because I do see both sides of it. As I've said before, I am not into diversity for diversity's sake, and actually, that's like what George Takei is talking about.
Right.
What he's saying is that, well, Gene Roddenberry's vision of this character was an Asian man of a heterosexual persuasion,
right?
And it's his creation, and we don't necessarily need to mess around with that. So I understand that particular argument. Sure. The argument that Simon Pegg's making, I think, is also prescient, which is like, George Takei can't have his cake and eat it too, right? Like, you are a gay man, and you're known for being this character, but you are actually known for being a gay pioneer. Mm-hmm. That's what you're known for, and you play that up. So you can't have it both ways, and we respect you for that. I mean, he's come to prominence in the last 20 years specifically for that.
Right, he came out in 2005.
Right. So maybe what, 10 11 years. for just being that, and that's fantastic, and that's great. And I think he's funny, and I think he's eloquent. I think he's a great guy.
Oh my,
he's awesome. He's an awesome guy. But
We gotta get him on the show.
so I'm with Tim where I feel like I am surprised by that, but I also am of the mind that like the character, like I would have liked to see, if we want to have more diversity in terms of sexuality, which is great, and it's not within Gene Roddenberry's original idea, then I think it would have been more appropriate for them to make a new character. And I understand that you don't want to have tokenism and all that kind of stuff. But we can bring this to a further extent, which is Sulu still an Asian man?
Yes.
Okay, so why isn't he a black woman then? I mean, it's the same thing. It's like what George Takei is basically saying is like he is what he is.
Right.
And Gene Roddenberry is famous in early television sci-fi for being super progressive, like outrageously progressive. As you said, I'm not a huge Star Trek fan, but everyone knows that like Star Trek was a huge step forward in television, not only for the science fiction genre, but for television generally, along with I Love Lucy and a few others that were basically saying like, this is biracial or this is all these kinds of things.
Right.
And so he should be respected for that. So it's almost, I don't want to say it's almost a slap in the face to him, but it's almost like, he already took so many steps forward that no one else would take, and you want to and he already made this Asian. He was the first prominent Asian character on television that anyone can even name.
Yeah. And
so it's like I don't know, like you need to push it all the way to the nth degree instead of keeping in Gene Roddenberry's ultra fucking progressive, ultra fucking diverse vision as it stood already. Like why do you have to have everything in it?
I like the idea of it. Like, and again, I think for me it's separating the fandom from it or whatever, in the fact that I like the idea that if it hasn't been addressed or whatever, that this is the thing. And the reason we've never made a big deal or even talked about it before is just the fact that, of course, there's aliens and all these other things. Why would we be hung up on homosexuality, right? The fact that there hasn't been a gay character in the show, in the universe, is off-putting, and that's weird. But it's not, I don't need a storyline all about it shoved down my throat either. The fact, the way Simon Pegg makes it sound, for us not having seen Beyond, it's not out yet, is the fact that it seems like it's just a shot or whatever, right? Like that, and that's all it is. And like it's getting, not blown out of proportion, but it's there as a way to honor Takei. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just ask you a question. You said why is it off-putting? That there's never, why is that important within the realm of Star Trek? Because I don't.
We're talking about the diversity of it and everything else. And
right.
The fact
So
that if I'm a minority, I'd like to see myself represented on screen in some fashion. And especially if we are into this thing of, and I'm not knocking Star Trek in the 60s or whatever. I think that's hard to do or whatever. We are aware of.
I would say it's impossible to do.
We are aware of the steps this show took and what it did. But I'm talking about even then, it's again, not as somebody who's not even a fan. And again, like what we were talking about the last week with the whole, black people versus cops and all this other stuff of just like, it's hard for me to put in the shoes. I've watched 2 Star Trek movies now. I'm in and out of the show every so often or whatever. And I've never been like, man, where are all the gay characters? But like when you call it out, it's like, oh, fuck, right. This is a universe filled with aliens and all these different things. And this isn't something that's ever even hinted at. And I'm pulling what we're pulling from this thing where Simon Pegg's saying that's the case, that there's never been LGBT in it. I would think, oh, that's an interesting thing to call out. Yeah, I would like to see some representation of that.
Right, but I admit that I'm arguing from a point of weakness simply because I've not given this any thought at all. I found out about this literally 10 minutes before the show began. But my point here is that last week on PS I Love You XOXO, we talked about gay characters, our favorite gay characters. And I was like, I don't even know that I can name that many because... And then people tweeted at us or put in the comments like, what about this guy? And what about this girl? And what about this? And I'm like, oh yeah. The thing is that their sexuality isn't defining of them any more than the sexuality of a straight character defines them. And so... it seems like an ancillary kind of thing one way or the other. I understand that you want to have minority representation and all that kind of stuff, and I respect that. That's fantastic. But they're doing it because the man who played him in real life is gay. Yeah. That's why they did it. And not for any other reason. So it actually seems kind of, it's not tokenism by definition, but it is pandering as opposed to creating characters from stock that, or from scratch rather, that are going to rise up and give gay or lesbian or bisexual viewers a character that they can relate to on a sexual level. But I'm so I know I say this from a place of privilege as a white straight man, but I don't, and maybe it's because we take it for granted, but I still haven't wrapped my head around completely the idea that like I have to relate to the character in every single way on screen to be able to relate to them as their fictional device. In other words, like I don't look at, the white man on screen and be like, well, he's a white man, so I relate to him.
But I think that's the problem, though, is like what you're saying was like, that's just because we've grown up with that just being, that is so the norm to us. Whereas for all the other people that aren't white, straight males, like watching it when they see all these other characters, it is different, and it is like, oh shit, like this represent, like it's not just not me all the time. You know what I mean? It is exactly. There is something that does represent me.
I get it. I just don't like. I guess what I'm saying is like I related to Ellie in The Last of Us, a teenage lesbian girl, right? Or in Gone Home, same thing. Like you kind of relate to them and kind of are interested in them. I guess what I'm saying is like I know I've taken that for granted. There's no doubt about that. I know that I speak from a place of unimaginable privilege. I know that too. I just don't. I feel like there must be, and I guess people can sound off in the comments on this as well. In my mind, like for as much as you want representation of yourself in many different ways, there certainly must be minorities, whether it is in sexuality or sexual preference or in race, that are like, well, but isn't that also telling me that I can't relate to what we like to the person that's not like me because because I'm not defined by my sexuality or I'm not defined by my race. So I just like I feel like it's so much more complicated than people make it out to be. I'm not saying these people are wrong. I'm not saying diversity in these things is a bad thing. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a diverse and progressive outlook in the 21st century. Of course we could. We all do. We all share the same pro-gay, pro-choice, pro all these kinds of things viewpoints at this table. I'm just kind of making an argument that maybe it's being taken to an nth degree with this particular case, and maybe with certain other cases where the
big thing about it is I think that we're talking as the majority. So for somebody from a minority populace to look at this, I think for sure they find themselves something that connects them to the mainstream characters, the major characters. But I think to find somebody that shares something that is so definitive for them and is so many people look down upon and is this thing that is still a huge issue, and acceptance is still so hard fought for all of these different things. I think that's where it is, and I think that's the other side of it too. It's not even it's for a gay person to look at and be like, oh cool, gay people on TV, I'm gay, it's not that strange anymore. It's also the fact of, hey, mainstream, wake the fuck up to there being gay people and it not being weird, and that is the whole point of, and that's why I think the Sulu thing is a strong indicator as well. Not that I think that if I was going to talk about like, man, there's so many bigots in these communities, I don't know if I would go Star Trek right up at the top or whatever, but in the way of like,
not even close.
Hey, you know this character, you've loved this character, you've loved him for years, or you've loved him for now 3 movies. Guess what? He was gay the whole time, and it wasn't a big deal, and he wasn't weird, and he acted like a normal person because he is a normal person. What you think in the middle of America who you don't know any gay people, and I'm talking from my own experience being, through high school till I got to college and met my first openly gay person, right? Like I was around gay people all the time probably in high school and didn't know it because they were just normal people and hadn't come into their sexuality or whatever. It's driving home that message that the minorities aren't outcasts, they're normal, and that's the whole point of it. Like you've loved Sulu this whole time, he's been gay the whole time, that shouldn't change your opinion of him.
Yeah, and I also think that it's not so much that they are looking at Sulu and like need to see themselves in Sulu. It's more the idea of they are minorities, they're not non-existent. And I think that having it just be like, yeah, it doesn't need to be, every character doesn't need to be gay, not every single thing needs to be represented everywhere, but having that scene, just him with his husband or boyfriend or whatever it is in the background of a shot, it's like that is enough to just be like, that is a minority in the sense of this whole thing, but it exists and it's okay. And I think it's that sense of seeing yourself in the world, not so much in the character.
Good point, yeah.
And when it comes to the Simon Pegg stuff, I just feel like, him being one of the writers on this, it's like, obviously there's a political agenda there. And I think that he is trying to say that gay is normal. It's fine. Gay is something that people are, and they're not different than you because of it. And I think that making Sulu the gay character, I mean, obviously I do think that like the pandering, I think it is pandering, but I also think in the good sense though of like fan service, and I think that he meant that in a way to honor George Takei. You know what I mean?
I don't think there's anything negative in what he's doing at all. I don't think any of it's negative. Sure. I'm just making kind of an argument that I've not even fully formed in my own mind because I haven't thought about it too much, where I just kind of I wonder about the other side now. I wonder about the other side, like where it's like, well, the characters are the characters. Like, make your art the way you want to make your art.
Right.
I was telling Nick about an idea that I'm developing, a story that I'm sketching, where the protagonist is a black man in his 30s. And I wrote that not for any other reason than that's just the vision I had of that character in my head. So that's what I'm going for. It's like will I be able to speak for him in an authoritative way as a white man and a 31-year-old white man? Maybe not, but why can't I necessarily write the dialogue or create this character nonetheless? That's just the character I saw in my head when I was coming up with this idea, and so I put it forth. In other words, like I like the idea of creating for creation's sake, yet Star Trek has so much lineage at the same time that, and with George Takei being really one of the most notable characters that come out of that, not the most notable, it's certainly one of the top 3 or 4 most notable people that have ever played any of those roles, that you can understand why they did that. And I think they're doing the right thing, because I do think that gay is normal. I think we've all known that for many years. And, and I like to see this kind of representation. I just kind of also understand, I guess, like what we were talking about, what we haven't really touched on, which I think is what he was kind of talking about, what George Takei is talking about, is that like these characters already exist.
Yeah.
And like you do, like what is the authority of someone to rewrite those characters? In other words, if Gene Roddenberry was still alive and writing, Gene Roddenberry died, right? He's dead like long.
So,
yeah.
yes.
But nonetheless hasn't been connected to these, I don't think, in any other way than, he's the creator of the series and really
he was
the pioneer of the
producer
series.
on some of the movies.
Right. No, that I know. But would he be able to take his characters and reform them or reboot them? Or probably, yeah. But like, at what point does a character become like what the character is? And I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, I see this raging a lot in comic books with the female Thor. I don't know a fucking goddamn thing about Thor, but I know that happened. I know that Iron Man now is going to be a black woman for a little while. I know that, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. But like, but you can kind of see the other side as well, and I do like where I don't mean it in any sort of mean way or anything like that to the people that are being represented by these things. Where it's just like, well, yeah, but Iron Man's Tony Stark, isn't he? Like Tony Stark's character, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with that either. And so I get people's attachment to these different things. And I think George, and why I'm so interested in the other side of the argument, is George Takei is representing it, where he's saying like, I'm a gay man and I played this character and he's straight.
That's the thing that I think is the only real wrinkle in this, is that I completely agree with Simon Pegg, and that I like that they're trying to introduce a gay character into Star Trek. I think it's important. I think culturally it's going to go a long way toward making it okay to be gay, and seen as okay to be gay on screen, because I think that really does help shape younger generations. Like when kids see that, it really does have a good effect on them,
100%.
in that it just conditions them to think that's normal. That's normal. Everything's normal. It doesn't matter. But I think the only reason why this gave me pause was because they did it to honor George Takei, and George Takei told them no and lobbied against them multiple times, according to the article that I read, saying he said, "Don't do this. This is not the character. Like, I played this character as straight in a time when racism was a difficult time in the United States to be an Asian American and being seen as a lead actor on a television show. That was kind of a hard fought battle, and you're to him, I think it's they have the best intentions, but he didn't want it to happen. So if you're paying homage and honoring George Takei, then wouldn't it be therefore honoring him to just keep the character what it was before? And to me, it's not even a question of making the character gay or straight. It's just saying like, don't do this because you're honoring me. If I don't want it to happen, it's not honoring me. You're not actually honoring my intentions.
Real quick, I'm sorry. From the get-go, they said this is to honor him.
Yeah, I mean that's
obvious, though, right?
Well, no, I know, but I'm just wondering how they've talked about it. I've heard one.
Well, that was in the quote that I
just making sure.
Read, yeah.
Yeah, to me, it's like the honoring thing. Like I didn't know about that, and I didn't know about him lobbying against it or whatever. I thought this was just like the quotes.
He had asked them to not do it. Yeah, apparently.
Interesting.
And had lobbied, basically saying like, this is not what Gene wanted.
That changes things, but at the same time, it doesn't, because it's like, all right, well, you don't have control over it. And the thing with the honoring the character, if they did do it to honor him, that's one thing. But I think honoring, again, the fan service is a very different aspect of it. It's like whether or not he wants it. I'm sure that there's a ton of people that see that and they're like, and the actor was gay. This is a cool little nod to that. You know what I mean?
And that's important too, right? Because you have already in the cast of characters, you have Zachary Quinto, who is an openly gay man playing Spock, who is I guess would be a heterosexual Vulcan.
Who's
trying to keep my terms straight there.
No,
right?
Nanu, indeed.
But that's super important too, right? And they have an interracial relationship, so that's very, very important in and of itself, because Hollywood has had a problem with that, a huge problem with having gay actors play straight characters.
I didn't know he was gay.
Oh yeah, openly gay. So that's huge too. So it kind of like the last almost piece of the puzzle is having a character that is gay. And I do agree with Simon Pegg in that you can't just introduce a character, because then the criticism would be you're just putting this token gay guy in the scene, and who is this person? And he's not going to be really a part of the movie anyway. And don't fucking put him in a red shirt, for Christ's sake, because that's just not going to be a good thing.
The other piece of the puzzle, right, is the fact, and this is again ignorance on my part, not being that guy. As somebody on the outsides of all of this, even now, but with 2 movies under my belt, I feel like this only adds flavor to this character.
Yeah,
like right,
yeah.
Him and Chekhov and all these other people, or Scotty, right, or whatever. They're just like. They're like literally like bones. They're all like one-liners and shit.
They're there
right?
to service Kirk.
Kirk is the guy that I know everything about, and now everybody knows I know everything about Spock and what's her name? Not Hulu. Uhura. Like she's in the middle where I don't know a lot about her background. Again, as somebody who knows 2 movies, but it's like obviously Kirk and Spock are the fucking picture,
right?
And then it's like all these other guys just bounce off the ship and go do whatever. Like now they're gonna give me a scene of him hugging his husband and having a baby. It's like, all right.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to your earlier point about the comic book stuff too. I mean, this does happen, but the Iron Man thing, it's a whole different character. This would be changing the character, but again,
That's fair enough. I don't know anything about what I'm actually talking about.
No. I just want to clarify that.
I just see people's outrage. I just see outrage. See, I didn't bring up.
It's not like she's the new Tony Stark. It's a whole new
Okay, I didn't know that.
Someone,
so
they're bringing in
but I just see people upset about everything under the sun in comic books, and so I'm like, okay, but if they're not changing the character,
they've only had 70 years of Tony Stark.
Well,
There's so much more to do with
that. That was
going
to be my earlier point. That was going to be my point, right? Which we have had this character as a heterosexual character, since the 60s. I don't see any reason at this point. It's like, all right. You've had it, everyone. You've had that. You have a long lineage of not like 6 movies, 7 movies with this character in it.
Yeah.
And how many people are like, yeah, Sulu's my favorite character because he fucking bangs chicks.
Yeah,
right, exactly. Right, exactly.
My thing with it is, I just feel like the respecting the character. I think that there's certain traits that define what a character is, and there's a whole bunch of other things where it's like, so him being straight really a thing? Because it sounds like, all right, great, there was
Kirk, that's a perfect example. Like Kirk's womanizing plays really into his character, and that's like his insecurities coming out a little bit.
The way I see it is like with what's it? Sulu.
Yeah.
Like the color of his eyes or the shape of his eyes or the color of his hair or the way he styles his hair. Does any of that matter? Does this actor look like that actor? No, the actors look kind of different. You know what I mean? So it's like, why do those aspects not matter, but his sexual orientation matters? Like, I think that unless there's a story plot element to it, whatever. I agree. It's just another like slider.
I mean, but it's weird. It peaks. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay.
It does pop up with me, even though like still to this day, like, and I do look internally and think I am still conditioned to like push these ideas away. Right. A perfect example of it, as I think I read this correctly, was in the new Harry Potter play. Hermione is black, and at first I was like, that is ridiculous. That is sacrilege. Then I'm like, I guess it doesn't really matter. That doesn't matter at all.
Do you care what the
character was never defined as a white person? It was only defined as a Caucasian in the movies because they had to cast someone, and that person just happened to be white.
Was that Rowling's vision all along for Hermione? Was that she was black?
She didn't have a vision for her. She just said
best actress came
this
along.
Can be whatever it needs to be.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't think she's defined with the exception of, with the exception of maybe like Cho Chang and a few other characters. Like I don't think there is really any ethnicity that's incredibly important.
Do you know who the runner-up for the role was? George Takei.
Hermione was almost an old Asian gay man.
A little weird.
Oh my, Harry!
I feel like I guess I'm just becoming more fascinated with the other side of the more George Takei centric argument, which I think is what he's making, which is like, I kind of think there's subtext to it where he's basically saying like, well, the character is the character as the man who created him envisioned him. And I don't think I think that there's some racism and some bigoted nature behind people being mad about the Spider-Man that's Puerto Rican or whatever, even though that's a different character too. That's why I didn't bring him up. Or Thor or whatever. I don't know anything about comics. I just see people getting upset about these like almost racial or sexual things in comics specifically over and over again. So I thought that was a good example. But the other side where it's like, I'm interested in how like the black community or the Latino community or the gay community or whatever feels about being pandered to as well. And when they look at something and they're like, well, just make it the way you want to make it, dude. Like it's like I feel like there's almost the other side where it's become, maybe for sexuality, especially in our, I mean, we're in San Francisco. I mean, it doesn't get any more fucking normalized than it is here, which is great. But like the other side of the coin where it's like, all right, like we don't need, if your vision has no gay people in it, doesn't really affect my life. And I'm not saying that as me as the straight white man. I'm saying that as the gay man or the gay, the gay woman or whatever. And I'm interested in that kind of argument as well. In other words, like, I like the more subtle, nuanced characters that are created because there's reason to create them. And so if a movie's being made with nothing but minority characters because that is the plot device or that is the way the story wants to be told or that's just the vision and there's no reason for it at all, that's great. But like, I wonder if like in shoving diversity into every single aspect in any way we can, we don't also do service always to the story or to the plot. And so is this just like, as was being said before, just a distraction, even though it's this minor thing, like it's become this big thing now. Yeah. Where it's like, it was supposed to be an homage and that's really nice. And I'm sure it was done with good intentions. I think George Takei is being a little weird about it. I would probably, if I was him, I'd probably be like, maybe privately upset, but publicly being like, like supportive and all that kind of stuff. So I just think it's more complicated and nuanced than that. Like where I'm more interested in having, we're having a 2016 conversation, or we think we're having a conversation in 2016, but I actually felt we're having a conversation in like 2005. Where now, like in 2016, I'm interested in like things have become so normalized in so many ways that I'm wondering, like at what point do you just treat it as normal?
Well, the thing, I know you're going to jump on the normalized thing, but to get on it earlier, like, I think one of the big things that we're not talking about here is ownership of the characters and stories, right? You keep saying if you have a story to tell, just tell it. Well, this is the story they want to tell, whether it's an homage or whatever. They want to put a gay person in this. How do they do that with a show that then is anchored in the 60s where there was no gay people and there were, I mean, they have to do that and they have to make the changes because it's the same thing of like, to the comic example, right? If, you know, they make Superman, right? Siegel and Schuster here. We have Superman. There you go. And then for the rest of Superman, he can't evolve beyond what their vision was then. So he's just leaping tall buildings in a single bound. He can't fly. There's all these different little things. They can't change the costume. It's at some point these do become. I understand. The argument here is so interesting because you have George Takei, who is Sulu, right? And who had the direct connection, who worked with the originator of the work, who wrote the character and told them what the character was, and this is how you're playing the character. But then it is in new hands, and so it is. You know, I'm the guy who's arguing about continuity earlier. It is in new hands. These people are making the movie they want to make, and they have to be able to put that stuff in and make those changes.
It's a good point. And that's why it's complicated. And I'm not even sure what side of the argument I actually land on. I'm just making it the side of the argument because I'm kind of compelled by it. Like where it's like, well, it's not just so cut and dry. I think there's more to it or whatever, more to think about. And there's so many layers societally within ourselves and within like the population at large in 2016. Where I almost feel like by calling these things out, it denormalizes them. And like, and so like, you know, I like the idea of organically fixing things or organically making things normal because then I think it looks more normal to everyone and then I think everyone accepts it more. But also maybe the minority and gay populations don't really have that luxury either. So I think it's more complicated than that, but I'm just spitballing. I don't really know.
I hear you.
It is fiction at the end of the day. I mean, like, who really gives a fuck? I mean, that's the. I mean, at the end of the day, that's kind of where I'll leave my thoughts. Is like, it really doesn't fucking matter.
But I think it does matter though, because I think that the fiction does kind of dictate a lot of these little kids growing up, or even adults watching things. Like to see that and be like, it's normal. Like they need to accept that it's normal, you know, because it is. It's being shown in movie theaters across the whole world, you know what I mean? And
it's getting to people where it isn't normal.
Exactly. Right. And I think that, you know, a long time ago, it's not too many people were complaining or were saying that there's not enough white people in movies, you know what I mean? And then over time, now it's turning into this thing of there's too many white people in movies because they're taking what could be other minorities' roles and stuff. And I think that what you're talking about, the 2005 versus 2016 conversation is, I think it does need to swing really extremely in the other direction to normalize it eventually, to get it to a point where it is like, oh no, everybody's being represented in a way that makes sense, that's doled out however it needs to be. Because I think the problem is earlier you brought up that you feel like maybe they feel like they're being pandered to too much or whatever. Mm-hmm. To me, that's the equivalent of like I got a black friend. He says it's cool if I say the N-word. We're cool. Right. You know, and it's like, just because he does cool doesn't mean that there's so many other people that don't. And the problem is no one person represents it all. And I think that is the challenge, is trying to figure out how to solve for the greater population instead of the one-off things. Because I'm sure there's people that are like uncomfortable when, like, I'm sure there's gay people that are uncomfortable by all of this, where it's just like, fuck, why is this being such a big deal? Why is it either happening or not happening? But I feel like it needs to happen so that one day it won't happen.
I think that's a good point. I think you're right on everything you said, both sides of it. Because I do think, I wonder, like, as being, I'm as normal, I guess, in American society's terms, in terms of entertainment as that it is, right? I'm American, I'm white, I'm male, and I'm straight. So I have nothing to worry about in this regard. I look back, I was thinking, for some reason, G.I. Joe came to mind to me because I think about the minority representation in that show, and some of it was really well done. Like Roadblock was one of my favorite characters, and he was just a black guy, right? Like he was just a black guy, like all the other Joes, like Duke and Flint and all those other guys. But then there was like Spirit, who was like the old Indian shaman man, and there was like Quick Kick, who was like the Asian karate expert. Yeah. And there's like, and so I'm like, all right, like it's a little like.
Also, one could read into a black man being called Roadblock as being slightly racist as well.
Really? I don't know. I always looked at him as being like.
Can I get a minority report on Roadblock, Kevin? I need a minority report on Roadblock being black.
I don't know. I don't see it.
Thank you, Kevin.
Right. So I'm not saying like I've kind of.
What if we call the Peruvian character Lomo Saltados?
The Lomo Saltados, and he has a handgun and an eagle, like Spirit did. like I've waged this whole argument in my mind, or this whole battle in my mind, where I'm like, I just don't know exactly where I come down on it, because there's no doubt that diversity in fiction has been positive for disparate sections of society, but actually for fiction itself, which I think is fantastic as well. I think that's often lost on a lot of people. Like when I played The Last of Us, I wasn't thinking about Ellie as being a little girl. I thought Ellie was just the compelling character that was happening to be a little girl, and then we found out she's gay in the DLC and stuff. So I like that there's like these little nuanced kind of things, and Gone Home is an example, an overall example of the same thing, where you don't even know what the story's about originally, and then it's about something you don't expect, and you can relate to those characters. And so I guess what I'm saying is that as a white man, I never felt the need to relate to white men in my fiction or whatever. Yet I also think, admittedly, there is a subconscious thing in my mind where I'm like, you have nothing to worry about, Colin, because if you really needed to relate to someone on that base level, just look around.
Right, exactly.
You know, so I admit that's there, but I am interested in and we've become so progressive in such a quick time in the United States in some ways. I mean, what's going on with race in this country right now shows that we're not quite as progressive as we'd hope. But I think with sexuality particularly, if you look at polling, and you look at different results around the states with gay marriage and all those kinds of things, and how quickly that turned rapidly, like within a decade. It turned around completely. That I just was wondering if, like, I do wonder if the gay population at large, I wonder if the black population at large, maybe not individuals or little sections of them or pockets of them, are now saying like, okay, like, we just want to be treated like we're normal, and we don't need to be represented in every single thing to be treated as normal, to be normal in society. And that we're actually creating conversations that are not necessary, that could be regressive in making that kind of representation normal, and where it really counts, which is in the real world. So that's kind of the argument I'm trying to make. But I don't know whether it's a salient argument or not. I just think that it's an interesting kind of take on it that makes it not so cut and dry. And I think it's kind of where he's coming from, not from so much of the fictional device that he's talking about with Gene Roddenberry, but also about as a gay man in America. And he's one of the most prominent gay men in America today. So, so that's kind of where I stand on it. But I just don't know. I'd be interested to see what people say in the comments, because I think this is more complicated than it seems.